So I've always had a kind of a hobby of kind of studying musicians and trying to figure out which bands are satanic, right? Like real satanic, right? Not just using the aesthetics and the imagery, but actually are applying satanic principles of lesser magic or greater magic or both. Incorporating that within their music. I guess I developed an interest in that simply because music is pretty much what turned me on to Satanism to begin with. I mean, there was a satanic panic, right? But a lot of bands like you say Motley Crue was like doing the inverted pentagram, Slayer. And I wasn't really into the death metal scene. I mean, I was kind of aware of it, what scene was there in the late '80s, early '90s, but wasn't really paying attention to it that much. But just even like mainstream metal bands like Motley Crue, Metallica, Slayer, they had like their imagery and stuff. I'm not talking about those bands, although some of them are legitimately satanic. Most of them are not. But bands that are consistently using principles of lesser magic in their lyrics. And I'm not talking like just one song or two songs. I'm talking consistently, like over the course of a decade. Every single album, every single song, or at least the majority of their songs. Stuff like that. There's quite a few out there actually that I noticed that are using principles of lesser magic, and the only way they would know these certain principles. Hold on a second. The only way they would know these principles is if they studied and read certain books that are listed in the bibliography of the Satanic Witch by Anton Lavey, which is the book of lesser magic. The bibliography is fucking incredible. The books in there, a lot of them are very rare, a lot of them are very specific, and so for people to know this information, they would have had to have read these books, or they would have had to have been taught by somebody who's read these books. Either way, when they're consistently applied, that's when I label them. That's a satanic band. That's legitimately a satanic band. And I'm not going to really go into like who they are. I know, right? Because I figure it's kind of a secret, and for me to like, just to say who they are, one, you probably wouldn't believe me. Two, kind of takes away from what they're doing, right? Because a lot of these bands don't use any satanic imagery. A lot of these bands don't openly advertise, that they're Satanists. Some do, but the majority of them actually do not. And it's kind of surprising, the ones. And, it's when I say a satanic band, I don't necessarily mean that every member in that band is a Satanist, because it's highly unlikely that they are. What I mean is either whoever's writing the lyrics are, and it's not even and it could also be people that are producing these bands, right? So it's hard to say because if you're not in that band, right, you're not part of that musical production, you don't really know who's really doing what. But but yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, some bands, like what I can talk about is bands that already have flirted with it and then backed away when they got big. Say the first one, which is the first legitimately satanic band, is the Rolling Stones. Rolling Stones, I mean, outside, I'm not going to go into the principles of lesser magic and how they do it, because, well, one, that's a very, very long video. It's very complex. Two, again, it's taken away from the secretive value of it, right? It took me a long time to learn these secrets, decades. So for me to just tell us, like, this is how it's done, this is what it is, you'd have to, be doing me it would devalue the secret, right? It's something for you to learn, can't be told. So, but like I say, I'll point out a couple timing coincidences. Like in 1966, the Church of Satan was formed. Mick Jagger released, or not Mick Jagger, Rolling Stones released an album called Their Satanic Majesty's Request. In 1969, the year the Satanic Bible was written, or not written, but released anyway, they wrote their hit song, or released their hit song, Sympathy for the Devil. And Mick Jagger also played instruments in one of Kenneth Anger's, who was part of the Inner Circle of Nine, Order of the Trapezoid, something like that, in the early days of the Church of Satan. He's one of the founding members of the Church of Satan in their original OG circle. And he also appeared in the movie along with some of the other members of the Rolling Stones. And there's other things that are timing wise, and but then when they got big, kind of distances themselves from it. But their applications of lesser magic never dissipated, never. Consistently throughout every album I've ever heard by the Rolling Stones, I can see it. And so that's the main one. That's that one I can give you because they've already flirted with it. It's kind of, you know, in the late 60s. And they downplayed it as being like a kind of like, you know, oh, it's like an occult phase. A lot of bands were doing it. Kind of like Led Zeppelin was doing it. You know, Beatles even did it a little bit. And so on. David Bowie, he's kind of known to, I mean, he kind of downplayed it too, but I think his last album, The Black Sun, he definitely dabbled in the occult quite a bit. I'm not going to keep going on about the names, but those are some older ones. Either they're already known or dead, so it doesn't really matter. But but you know, I mean, where's it going with this? Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying all these bands or every band that I hear these things. It's a matter of consistency, matter of continuance throughout, you know, the decades of releasing albums. And it may not be the singer, may not be the band, it could be the producer. It's somebody who's pulling the strings. Somebody has a knowledge of these principles. So that's it. It's very interesting. You'd be surprised that a lot of these more overt bands like like Slayer, for instance, you know, there's a lot of satanic imagery. I don't think, well, you know, and you know what, another thing you have to understand is a lot of these bands, when confronted with it, you can ask them, people are like, oh, well, he said that this song was written about this. It's like, it doesn't matter. Of course he's going to say that, right? They're not going to tell you right away. They're not just going to say, you're right. You know, well, actually, some of them will. Like Ghost, Ghost is fucking awesome. I love Ghost. That is a legitimate satanic band, but they're obvious about it. They're open about it. At least Tobias Forges, which basically is Ghost. So then what was it? Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a very interesting hobby. It's a very interesting thing, and you know, I'm not right about all of them. You know, I'm just I just try to focus on the ones that I see these principles consistently applied to. Buck, I'm kind of stalling because I had a point. Well, I had something that was relevant that I don't remember what I was going to say anymore. It's early. Usually I'm up this early. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. What the whole, and it's not just music either. I mean, it's media in general. I call it the diabolical infestation. That's what I like to call it. It's you know, the applied principles of lesser magic to influence media. Media is a mass influence of people's opinions, of what people think are right and wrong, people think are cool and not cool. And, you know, when there's Satanists out there applying these principles, it is basically a ritual of sorts. It's a practice in lesser magic, and it's a practice of using techniques to manipulate the masses, their attitudes and their opinions, their what they think is cool, their outlook on things. Basically, it's programming them, to conditioning them to respond a certain way to certain things. And it's basically to destroy, in my opinion, one thing I do see is to basically dissolve Christian morality. I'm not talking about good Christian morality like, you know, the golden rule. I'm talking about the whole piousness and the whole concepts of organized religion, of a higher power type of God. I mean, yeah, there are other principles. Basically moving people's opinions to be more, well, again, I can't really talk about this too much without really stepping the line here. So I'll just end it at that. But yeah, it's called the diabolical infestation, and that's what I like to call it. But it's definitely true. It happens in music, it happens in media, it happens in television, see in movies too a lot. And you'll see them. You'll see consistency in there. That's it. All right. I kind of found my train of thought. I was thinking about Marilyn Manson, another good example of somebody who was very open and very overt at first about his, you know, Satanism. I mean, and it's hilarious when I argue with these little Mansonites or these new ones, right? Anyway, online, you know, Marilyn Manson, his music is pretty obvious, but you know, his involvement. I mean, you know, his autobiography or biography, whatever, Long Hard Road Out of Hell, I think it was. There's a whole chapter about his involvement with the Church of Satan. He was made an honorary reverend in the Church of Satan by Anton Lavey. And there's other things that he's done. But I mean, you know, and you just look at his tattoo. He's got a giant Bathman tattoo on his, I think it's left arm. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the guy is a Satanist and he's involved in Satanism. Now, when he got big, he kind of downplayed it. If you watch some of the interviews where he talks about it, he'll downplay it a little bit. Like, yeah, you know, it's just like he kind of like says, hey, I was interested in that, and this is like Nietzsche and this and that. All of that is kind of a lot of what he mentions is the fundamentals of Satanism. So it's kind of funny that he kind of, when he backpedals into more philosophical things that are kind of the pillars of Satanism. But yeah, you know, and that's just it, because you know what? Satanism doesn't sell. You're not going to get rich being a Satanist. If you are, I mean, you very, 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 very rarely do they. I mean, you know, it's just, there's not enough people that have an interest in it. If you're going to get rich, you're going to get rich, you know, out because, in spite of being a Satanist. So you'll see a lot of bands downplay it, like the Rolling Stones did when they got bigger. Marilyn Manson did, Led Zeppelin did. A lot of bands will just downplay it like it was a passing thing or a fad. You know, take what you wish. But when they continue to use those principles, even though their so-called involvement is just, you know, a passing, no, it's not, because their involvement is actually very, very deep if they know these principles at all.